What a nice, reasonable game of hockey. And wouldn't you know it, hockey can still be exciting even without, I don't know, let's just say 17 goals being scored. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken win their 7th straight and improve that franchise record by winning this one 3-2 in overtime against the DC Capitals. And if you're new here, yes, I know they're called the Washington Capitals, not the DC Capitals, but believe me, if you grew up in the state of Washington like I have, and then have to explain to everybody anytime you go traveling that when you say you're from Washington, there's actually a state called Washington, and you're not from DC, you'd have similar feelings. That aside, what an exciting game this turned out to be. But exciting in a very different way from what we've seen recently, as the Kraken came into this game obviously coming fresh off of that 17-goal, 9-8 overtime circus of a game in LA, and then the game before that was still a 9-goal game, winning that one 5-4, a reasonable 6-goal game in Vegas, and then that 13 8-5 affair against San Jose in their last game at home. And while they did manage to win all of those games for a team that's found most of its success so far this season playing well defensively, they needed to find a way to get back to more those lower scoring style of games, rather than those high-flying track meets of games that we've seen recently. Lineup-wise for the Kraken, it's the same lineup that we've seen the last couple of nights, with the exception of the goaltending switching once again with Grubauer in net instead of Jones, and still having Kuhlman in instead of Geekie, who's still out with injury. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ice, there's actually a couple of guys worth mentioning as well in this game. Obviously, Alexander Ovechkin, who's coming fresh off of that game in Vancouver, where he set the NHL record for most career goals by any player in away games. But also, the return of Marcus Johansson, who played for the Kraken for most of last season before getting traded to the Capitals at the deadline. But maybe most notably, it's the return home for Seattle native TJ Oshie, who grew up in the area, and while the Capitals did play here last season obviously once, he was not healthy for that game, so this was his first return and first game in the city that he grew up in the NHL. Now, as we do get into the game, it became obvious relatively early on that this was going to be a very different game from the one we saw in LA. Now, obviously, not every game is going to be a 17-goal circus like we saw in that one, but by the 7.5-minute mark in this game, there were literally as many shots on goal combined between the two teams as there were goals in that game in LA. Thanks largely to both teams doing a very good job of shot blocking early on in this one, and playing something that we like to call defense. You may not be familiar with it, or at least Kraken fans might not be anyway, but this is what it looks like. Unfortunately for the Kraken, though, in order to keep the puck out of their net, you not only have to play good defense, but you also have to have at least pretty good goaltending. And, well, this is one that Grubauer needs to come up with. The goal that would put DC up by 1 comes as Sherry pulls the puck off the boards on the left end of the defensive zone and tries to feed Ovechkin for a shot straight down the middle, but McCann makes a nice defensive play, getting in his way and preventing the shot. Unfortunately for McCann, he ends up taking an elbow to the chin, with that getting up in Ovechkin's face, and so he skates off the ice, and while Ovechkin can't get any kind of shot off, the puck bounces off Ovechkin, right out to Faravari, who just skates up, fires off a shot, and beats Grubauer clean, glove side. And this one, again, is one that Grubauer just has to come up with. He's able to see the shot coming from Faravari all the way, and while it is a pretty nice shot by him, it's still a shot that comes from pretty far out, and is one that, yeah, like we've said, Grubauer needs to be able to save. Obviously, this is just his second game back from injury, so still a little bit rusty, but yeah. So, obviously not an ideal start, but it is still just 1-0 with most of the first period left to play, and then a second and third, obviously, after that, in overtime if they need it. And to the Kraken credit, they have been playing very good defense, with this just being the second shot on goal almost 8 minutes into the game. And as long as they can stay out of the box, it should be pretty easy to continue that. But of course, you guessed it, a few minutes later, just as the Kraken are starting to get their first real momentum of the game offensively, they head to the box. It's Eberle who ends up going there. Either way, they send DC to their first power play of the game, already down 1. And against the Kraken penalty kill unit that has been downright terrible in their last few games. And now all they have to do is stop Alexander Ovechkin, the NHL record holder for most career power play goals, from scoring and making it 2-0. Which, to make matters even worse, one of Ovi's signature things on the power play, and part of the reason he's gotten to where he is with power play goals, is that he plays the full 2 minutes of power plays. So it's not like the Kraken are even going to get out of it a minute in by just killing off that first half of it. Okay, I suppose it is worth mentioning that a couple minutes before this power play happens, there is a fight in this game, the only one of the game, between TJ Oshie and Yanni Gourde. It starts as Oshie lays a big reverse hit on Tanev, laying him out on the ice, and then Gourde comes to Tanev's defense. Now, I do think there might be something to the fact that Oshie could have been looking for potentially a fight or just something to make his presence known in his return home in his first NHL game in the city, or the city that he grew up near anyway. He's actually from Everett, if I remember right, but close enough to Seattle. And I suppose as fights go, it is a pretty good one. It lasts almost 30 seconds, and while neither of these guys get in a ton of fights, and it's certainly not a heavyweight one by any means, it still was a pretty decent one, and it ends by the Kraken bench with a pleasant exchange of words afterwards. So yeah, definitely one that I think was not just completely spurred off of anger and frustration. Anyway, fast forwarding back ahead a couple of minutes to that first Capitals power play of the game, as I said on Twitter as the power play was getting started, or actually as Eberle was heading to the box, which, as far as that's concerned, if you don't already follow me on Twitter, my link is down in the description below. Or, I mean, honestly, you might not have to worry about it since Twitter will probably be dead by the end of the Kraken season. But at least for now, I do try to keep up with things live, so you get my live thoughts on games if I'm not already streaming, which in and of itself is something I need to get back to doing. But anyway, as I said, as the power play was getting started, it was soon going to be 2-0. And while the Kraken penalty kill did put up a fight and got through the first minute of this power play, they did a good job right up until everything completely fell apart at once, and it's a quick passing play. Ovechkin down to Johansson, right back up to Sherry, and he buries the shot to give the Caps the 2-0 lead, just as I think pretty much everyone that's watched the last few Kraken games predicted. And not only is it 2-0 Capitals, but with this being the first shot of the power play, again, the Kraken doing a pretty good job of blocking shots up to this point. It is now 2 goals on 4 shots for the Capitals, here about halfway through the first. And for Grubauer on this one, did he have a chance to make the save? Yeah, he probably did. But honestly, if you're going to allow shots from that up close and just allow passing plays to happen through your entire penalty kill unit without really much of an effort to stop it, then goals are going to happen, regardless of who you have in net. Besides, as far as Grubauer is concerned, for what it's worth, which as it turns out might be the difference in the game, he is able to make the save on each of the next 19 or 20 shots, as we can tell from the final score, with the Capitals not scoring another one after this one. And among those saves, and actually one of the nicer ones he makes in the game, where he made some pretty big saves along the way, is one that comes right at the end of the first period to keep this just a 2-goal game. Now, up to this point, the Kraken were actually able to gain and then maintain momentum throughout really the rest of the first period after the Capitals took that 2-0 lead. But in those final seconds, the Capitals are able to press right back into the Kraken end and get one final shot off on goal, which does come up from by the blue line, but it's tipped nicely in front of the net, right onto Grubauer, and he does make the save. It's a redirect that could have easily ended up in the back of the net, but Grubauer comes up big here to, again, keep this just a 2-goal game going into the second. A second period that would basically start with the Kraken power play, though it really doesn't go much of anywhere, and in fact, I think the only actual shot attempt of the entire power play comes for the Capitals. It's not a particularly dangerous one, and Grubauer makes the save, but still not a great power play from Seattle. And then to make matters worse, DC is going to get their second power play of the game almost immediately afterwards. And I think it pretty much goes without saying that if the Kraken want any chance of winning this game, they need to kill this one off. Now, again, you've already seen the final score, so you know that they do it, but boy did they try hard not to, as Ovechkin gets 2 very big shots off during the course of this power play, and Grubauer is able to make the pad save on the first one, and then make a splits, fully extended glove save on the second one. And post-game, Grubauer did say that his time in DC with the Capitals, where he got to practice against Ovechkin and see that shot a little bit more frequently than some other goaltenders would, may have helped him with his ability to make a number of saves on Ovechkin in this game. And if that's the case, then that time in DC very well may have ended up winning this game for the Kraken, or at least getting it to overtime, with this save in particular on this power play. And so, again, thanks in large part to Grubauer, the Kraken are able to mercifully kill off this early power play in the second for the Capitals, and then as we get towards the middle of the period, after really not much of anything happens, the Kraken get their second power play of the game. And fortunately for the Kraken, well, again, the penalty kill has been downright horrible for the last few games. The power play has been pretty much the opposite, being nearly unstoppable in that time. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they've been scoring quite a bit. And while their first attempt may not have gone particularly well in this game, they waste absolutely no time scoring on this one. While they don't end up winning the faceoff, they do create a fight for the puck along the boards down in the corner right off of it, which they eventually win and get it out to Burakovsky, who's taking Dunn's place up on the point. Eventually, Burakovsky just kind of drops it off for Dunn, going back to his spot at the faceoff dot. They play catch once or twice, and then Dunn fires off a shot at the net that ends up going wide but bounces off the end boards right back out to Schwartz next to the net, and he roofs it into the back of it to get the Kraken on the board and bring them within one. It's now 2-1. Yes, it is a bit of a fortunate bounce that Schwartz gets off the end boards, but he makes no mistake on making it count. And not only do the Kraken pull to within one with this power play goal, but they're able to maintain momentum out of this power play really for the remainder of this second period, or pretty much the entire remainder of it anyway. Right up until the last minute or two of it, where once again, the Capitals are going to get a chance. But not before the Kraken almost even things up at 2, as Eberle puts a shot just off of the bar, which his shot does, fortunately for the Kraken, pull Kemper all the way out of the net, sprawling on his back in front of Eberle, displaying not quite the same style of goaltending that won Colorado the Cup last year. Either way, it leaves a completely empty net for Beniers to try to pick up this rebound and put it into, which he would have easily been able to do if the puck doesn't take a weird hop right over his stick and harmlessly end up going out of the offensive end. So while the Kraken do get a fortunate bounce on the power play for Schwartz to score on, that hockey karma, if you will, ends up going right back on itself, as what would have been an easy goal for Beniers here takes a weird bounce and he isn't able to get a stick on it. And then, of course, as these things tend to happen, right back the other way after Beniers gets robbed on a weird bounce, Oshie makes, admittedly, a pretty nice play to get past Schwartz, and then an even nicer pass as he's falling, spinning getting the pass, out net front to the other side for Kuznetsov, who gets what should be just a tap-in goal. Now I say should be, because Grubauer makes an absolutely spectacular save, diving back to the other side, getting his pad on the Kuznetsov shot, absolutely robbing him of putting the Capitals once again up by 2 in the final seconds, or getting close to the final seconds here in the second. And not only that, but also robbing him of a rebound opportunity, as the rebound off of his pad, Grubauer is able to scoop and then just kind of sit on next to the net, looking up at Kuznetsov like, yeah, I just did that to you. So for Grubauer, that's now a very good save to end the first, and then an absolutely amazing save to end the second, which definitely helps that momentum as you're heading into the next period. However, for the Kraken starting out the third, that momentum doesn't last very long, as they quickly send the Capitals to their third power play of the game. Thankfully, though, somehow for the second time this game, the Kraken are able to kill off a Capitals power play, but they do still have to find a way to score a second goal to make it matter, and until the back half of the third, they really can't get much of anything going. Fortunately, as we do get into the back half of the third, they finally start to build some momentum and really pressure the Capitals' end of the ice, getting a number of chances off on net, but just can't get anything to go. And that all continues right up until the Kraken momentum is brought to a screeching halt by the fourth Capitals power play of the game, and this one is brought on by an unlikely suspect. It's Matty Beniers, who comes out on the ice to start his shift in the offensive end and quickly liberates the sticks from 2 DC players, the second of which he sends flying way up in the air, which also sends the referee's arm up in the air, and Beniers to the box on his first trip to the box in his NHL career, which was a pretty incredible streak that is now brought to an end, unfortunately at a rather non-ideal time for the Kraken. Not only because they're now testing fate for a fourth time with this penalty kill that has been struggling against, again, Ovechkin, but also because the Kraken can ill afford to lose 2 minutes of time on ice, as they still need to tie this game with just about 7 minutes left in it. First things first though, they do now need to kill off a fourth Capitals power play. Fortunately, they are able to do that, finishing the night, and actually pretty impressive all things considered, 3 for 4 on the kill against Ovi and the Capitals. Again, with Ovechkin getting 8 minutes of time on the power play. Next, they need to get back into the offensive end and start creating pressure there and regain that offensive momentum, which does take them a couple of minutes to do, but eventually, in the final 4 or 5 minutes of the game, they are able to get back into the offensive end, get set up, and start getting some shots off on goal. And eventually, it's Daniel Sprong who makes everything happen as he gets the puck from along the boards and makes a nice play kind of curving up around from the boards out into the slot, firing off a shot backhand, and while the save is made, Yanni Gourde comes up from behind the net. Both he and Tanev, who's also in front of it, whack at the puck, and it's into the back of the net to tie the game with just 2.5 minutes left. And in the end, it's Yanni Gourde who got to the puck first as he puts it into the back, once again at the top of the net, tying the game up late for the Kraken. Again though, with this goal, while it is very exciting to see Gourde get his third of the season, a guy who, at least goal scoring wise, has been relatively snake bitten with a number of opportunities just having a hard time getting them go. Also exciting to see the Kraken have two guys net front whacking at this puck, so even if Gourde isn't able to get the shot off, Tanev still has a very good chance of putting it in. But this entire play happens off of the stick of Daniel Sprong, and the very nice play that he made to get to the slot to get that shot off. And for Sprong, this is a guy who, honestly, I feel like hasn't been talked about enough to this point in the season. And we've brought him up a few times, but you have to remember, this is a guy who came over in that Marcus Johansson trade with the Capitals at the trade deadline last season, and then scored a goal in each of his first 3 games with the Kraken, but was relatively silent the remainder of the year after that point. And then, as an RFA, didn't receive a qualifying offer and went to free agency, where eventually he wasn't picked up by any team, and the Kraken gave him a tryout for the preseason, which largely, when those tryouts happen, it means that he's either destined for the AHL or is going to be released back into free agency. But thanks to a good preseason, Sprong managed to find his way back onto the roster, really having to earn it with solid two-way play. The reason the Kraken didn't end up taking him back is they felt he didn't offer enough at the defensive end, but again was able to prove through that good preseason that he was worthy of a spot on that NHL roster. Still though, he had to find a way to work his way into the lineup, which was hindered by having the visa issues early on in the season. Even still, it took him a while to get onto that fourth line, as he's only played 16 of the Kraken's first 23 games. However, with those 16 games, he already has 14 points. And again, for a guy that started this season for the Kraken on a PTO, really not expected to even make the team, to now have 14 points in 16 games is honestly, I feel like, truly remarkable. And getting back to this game, again, it's his play that ties it late against his old team. And fortunately for the Kraken, there's no, for a third time, late period heroics needed from Grubauer to get this game into overtime, as both teams seemed pretty content with just getting that 1 point and fighting over the last one. However, as it would turn out, that fight for the last point in the standings wouldn't even end up lasting as long as Gourde and Oshie's fight in the first period, as just 7 seconds into OT, it's Matty B. Right off the faceoff, there's a bit of a battle for the puck, but Oshie does end up getting to it first, opting to drop an airborne pass to his lone defenseman, looking for clear possession of the puck like teams like to have at 3-on-3 overtime. However, before the puck can get to the outstretched hand of that defenseman, Burakovsky comes in and whacks it out of the air, taking possession of the puck. A little bit of a fight still for it, but in the end, the puck ends up in the possession of Matty Beniers on a breakaway, and as the Capitals literally trip over themselves to try to catch up to him, nobody can, and he puts it 5-hole right through Kemper and into the back of the net to win the game in OT just 7 seconds in, and the Kraken, 7 seconds into OT, have 7 wins in a row. And not only that, but this game winner in overtime is number 10 on the season for number 10. And also with the goal once again retaking sole possession of the lead for rookie scoring, as Pinto put his 9th in to draw even with Beniers last night. So it's another exciting OT win for the Kraken. Now, 2 of those in a row, and they've won each of the last 4 games that have gotten to OT for them, 3 of which have ended 3-2 in overtime at home. Yeah, ever since that loss 3-2 against the Jets in overtime and having that OT practice, it's clearly made a huge difference now with, again, those 4 wins. And the fans in the building still got to have a very exciting game, and it didn't even have to have absolutely zero defense being played with constant taking advantage of mistakes. It was just good hockey being played really by both teams, and the Kraken with the exciting comeback late and finishing it with the absolutely amazing goal from Beniers. Even with that OT winner though from Beniers, which also extends his point streak to 6 games, when we get to the Kraken 3 stars, or my Kraken 3 stars of this game, I think he's going to end up having to be an honorable mention, as there's 3 other guys I think are very deserving. Not that Beniers wouldn't be, I mean, he ends up actually getting the first official star in this game, so, I mean, that's pretty good. Still, for me, my first star is going to be Yanni Gourde. Not only does he end up tying the game late, which allows Beniers to get that OT winner, but he was also just all over the ice for the Kraken with great plays both in the defensive and offensive end. Not to mention also that fight against Oshie, giving that stage to the guy in his return home after Oshie wasn't able to play the last time the Caps were in Seattle. But again with Gourde, this season he's really been pretty much the same player he was for them last season. A constant pest to whoever the Kraken are playing, very strong on the back check and almost even stronger on the forecheck, as well as being really good on the penalty kill, even if the penalty kill as a whole has left something to be desired. Still, he's one of the best two-way players the Kraken have out on the ice whenever he's out there. Even if it hasn't quite led to the same level of points production as it did last year, with that really being the only difference to this point. And if he continues to play the way that he has, and did last season, those points are going to start coming, and we saw another one go in tonight. My second star of this game for the Kraken is going to be a guy who, well, halfway through the first period looked like he might be the scapegoat in a Kraken loss, letting in 2 of the first 4 shots from the Capitals, but then bounces back to stop the next 19 or 20 shots, ending the night with 21 saves on 23 shots for a .913 save percentage, also getting the real second star of the game. It's Philip Grubauer. Obviously, you can already see that he's over there, but coming back now with 2 wins in his 2 games back from injury. But especially for Grubauer, not only did he have those 2 big saves at the ends of the first and second period, but he's also a big part of the reason that Ovechkin on 4 power plays was held off the board. As far as goals are concerned, he did still get 2 assists. And speaking of guys that had 2 assists in this game, my third star for the Kraken is going to be Andrei Burakovsky, who has 2 assists of his own, continuing to rack up the points for the Kraken. At this point, well over a point per game to this point in the season. Well, I guess well over a point per game might be a bit generous, but he's safely on that side of a point per game, which, even if I think a lot of us expected him to be a good pickup in free agency when the Kraken signed him, I don't know if that many of us were expecting a point per game over a quarter of the way into the season. And there were even some people at the time who weren't even happy that the Kraken signed him at all. You know who you are. Finally, we'll close things out with a few more honorable mentions of guys that I think also are worth mentioning other than Beniers, who we already talked about. Sprong is another one that we talked about a bit. Also, Vince Dunn continues to play very well for the Kraken at both ends of the ice, still producing offensively, and defensively much more responsible than the Vince Dunn we saw last year. On top of that, Brandon Tanev, like Gourde, has really not gotten on the score sheet as much as, honestly, I feel like he's deserved to. Really, that whole third line has played pretty well for the Kraken in spite of not putting a lot of pucks in the net. But Tanev, again, a pretty good night, even if he doesn't end up showing up on that score sheet. But anyway, with that, let me know what you think down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars of this game would be, and what it was like to watch a game with a reasonable amount of scoring. Not way over the top like we've had in a few games recently. Otherwise, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below to help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until next time, when the Kraken take on the Panthers, who they've never lost to, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.